Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The Rangers have named JT Miller the 29th captain in franchise history. He was probably the front runner to be named captain, really between probably him and Vincent Trocheck. And they go with JT Miller. I honestly would have been okay if they hadn't named the captain. I'm probably in the minority on that one. Um, I wouldn't want to force that issue, and I don't necessarily know that there is a totally ideal candidate. And JT Miller is a fine one, not without risk either. But he was probably the odds-on favorite. Well, like I said, I think Trocheck, I would have been all right with that too if that's the direction they went in. I mean, I think if Adam Fox had more of the personality and more of the outward leadership skills, I think that that probably um would have been another potential candidate. But they go with JT Miller, and it's interesting. Um, who would have thought? JT Miller, a first round draft pick by the New York Rangers back in 2011, and was on the Rangers for quite some time. I mean, really was a Ranger for parts of 6 seasons until he was traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2018 trade deadline. So he was on Ranger teams that made it to the Cup final, won a President's Trophy. He was on some of the Ranger teams. Now, earlier on, he didn't have as much of a role. Like on that 2014 Cup final team, he played 30 regular season games and, just 4 of those playoff games. Really, he had much more of a role in that 2015 team. But even then, um, come playoff time, he was a regular by then. But even during the regular season, played 58 games. Really, it was after that he was, um, one of the top Ranger performers, I would say, but never really was a complete star. Um, 2017 was probably his best year as a Ranger. Played all 82 games, had 56 points in that season, and you knew that he was a good player, hard nosed player, versatile. Really came up as drafted as a center, but played more as a wing in his Ranger career. Um, and actually, his technically his first year was under John Tortorella, so there's a little bit of that. It's uh, then it was Alain Vigneault, and he was actually traded during Vigneault's last season. So he never made it to the David Quinn era, JT Miller. Um, but there was a lot of talk behind the scenes that Miller was not necessarily the easiest, um, in the locker room. And there's been talk as far as more so in Vancouver, I guess, as far as getting along with teammates, Elias Pettersson being kind of the main topic of conversation there. But he's a bit ornery. And and there's some good in that too. He's got an edge to him. And that's not a bad thing. But JT Miller, his reputation is one that's a little bit of it can be a mixed bag if we're being honest with ourselves. Now, he was a lot younger then, and I feel you know, could he have clashed with Vigneault at times? I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my part. But the fact that he was added into that Ryan McDonagh trade, and that's an ironic piece here, is that Ryan McDonagh at the time was the captain of the Rangers. And so this actually now is a string of 5 straight American captains. The last non-US Ranger captain was Jaromir Jagr. Then after that, it was Chris Drury, Ryan Callahan, Ryan McDonagh, Jacob Trouba. So number 8. Now JT Miller, number 8 is a Ranger. He was originally number 10 in his first stint with the Rangers. But yeah, Miller goes to Tampa. And that was a tough trade. I mean, that was a really, really poor trade. At the time, that was one of the worst trades. Trading McDonagh was one thing. And look, Ryan McDonagh is still in the Ryan McDonagh is still having success in the league now. And that was a trade that happened in 2018. But still, that part of it I can understand and live with. But the Miller part was tough. To throw him in that deal as well for what the Rangers got back. It was a bad trade then, and it ended up being a bad trade later on. And just from an asset management standpoint, the Rangers, 7 years later, trade for JT Miller and trade assets to the Vancouver Canucks to get Miller. That trade, I think, unfortunately, Filipino with his concussion issues, unless Victor Mancini becomes a really good player, which is possible, Like, I don't think the trade itself was bad, but like, there's 5 years on JT Miller's deal. Like, that's part of it. It's the contract. Like, there's 5 more years on JT Miller, and his style of play is such that I don't know, a player like that may not necessarily age as well as like an Artemi Panarin, who's more of a finesse player. Um, but going back to kind of Miller, and he goes to Tampa when he initially went there, pretty good. Like the rest of that 2018 season, he was really playing good hockey. But then 2019, on an amazing regular season Lightning team, he didn't. His role was really diminished. It was such a good team that he was kind of somewhat buried in the depth chart. Like again, his time on ice was way down, and the fit just ended up not being right. So it's not as if my point here is the Rangers weren't the only team to trade JT Miller. The Tampa Bay Lightning did as well. He goes to Vancouver, and that's where his career really, really takes off. His first year was the season that was cut short by COVID. Um, and it was a really good year for him. Then you have the next year, which starts late because of COVID, shortened year as well. But really, 2022, 99 points in 80 games, amazing. 2024, 103 points in 81 games. Like JT Miller was putting up some ridiculous numbers. And, even going back to his first year with Vancouver in the bubble in 2020, had an excellent playoffs, 18 points in 17 games after really his Ranger playoffs were nothing special at all. He only had one goal in about 40 Ranger playoff games. One goal and let's see here, 14 assists. Now, again, like it's not totally fair to just say that, but look, JT Miller was not like this great player performer, but he really was in Vancouver, and especially like in his first taste of playoff action with the Canucks. But you know, there were clearly struggles last season for him in Vancouver, just like off the ice. He took a kind of a leave of absence, and again, like there was definitely things going on there, between sort of the leadership core of that team, and Miller is shipped out. And it seemed like there was a bit of division there. And Miller is, traded back to the Rangers, and he was pretty good. Now, it's a team that ends up not making the playoffs. Now, there was a lot of issues before he got there, and there was a hope that maybe with Miller coming in, that could have been the difference between them making the playoffs. It doesn't happen. I mean, he puts up 35 points in 32 games. I thought he was okay. If I'm being completely honest, I thought that he was really good at first. Him and Mika Zibanejad did have some pretty good chemistry, and I think Zibanejad on the right wing, I think did him well. And JT Miller now is, he's a center, right? Like again, the JT Miller that we knew years back, we did not really see him at center. The Rangers at that time had a lot of centers, and Miller was a wing, but now he's down the middle, and is going to play a pretty big role. Power play, penalty kill, 5 years on the contract, and I just think it's interesting the way that this all went down. Who the hell would have thought when JT Miller was traded in 2018 that not only would he come back to be a Ranger, but be the captain in pretty short order as well. JT Miller was an alternate captain in the last few years of the Canucks. When he got there, Bo Horvat was named captain. And then they decided to go with Quinn Hughes. Like there was a chance that JT Miller could have been, after Bo Horvat was traded, but they went with Quinn Hughes. Miller wore an A. So, but he's never been a captain before. And it's a big responsibility. And we've seen it. Look, I think he'll be able to handle it. I do. But I don't know. We've seen it not really work out so well in some cases. Like I think about Ryan McDonagh, for example. Like Ryan McDonagh, I don't know that was for him. Like Brian Leetch is my favorite player. He's right behind me actually. And Brian Leetch, like in my opinion, he's probably the greatest Ranger of all time as far as, just actually being on the Rangers, right? There were better players that came in. Obviously, Wayne Gretzky was a Ranger. What I'm saying as a Ranger, Brian Leetch probably was not the greatest captain. And I don't know that his play necessarily suffered. Like at that point, those are some not so good Ranger teams, but it doesn't always pan out so well. Like, in the case of Trouba, that really wasn't successful either. And maybe for different reasons. I don't know if it was because I don't really believe in that case it was because he was the captain. I just think it's kind of just more the quality of the player. But the point is that like this is not a nothing title, right? I mean, original six franchise. There will be a lot of scrutiny towards JT Miller. And I think that he can handle that. he is, going to have to be a spokesperson for the team. That's like where like VIncent Trocheck, I think, comes in best. And JT Miller's probably gotten better with this over his career. He's very honest, which I don't mind. But Trocheck is really a good sort of mouthpiece for the team. I think he gives some really good and honest quotes after games. Speaking of Vincent Trocheck, he is now being given an A, which is an obvious move to make. And they didn't strip any of the pre-existing A's. So Zibanejad, Fox, Panarin all still have the A's with Trocheck. So 4 alternate captains, they'll mix those around. And so essentially what happened from last year to this year on the A's, Trocheck replaces Cryer, who was traded to the Ducks, and JT Miller replaces Jacob Trouba as captain. So not a total shocker. But at the same time, you had a few options to choose from. They decide, it's Mike Sullivan's first year. I guess they all collectively decided that they wanted to have a captain, which is the norm. I think there's only maybe 2 teams that don't have a captain currently in the Boston Bruins and the San Jose Sharks. So this is more of the norm for sure. It took a lot of twists and turns where JT Miller, just shy of maybe 15 years ago was drafted by the Rangers in the first stint, had its ups and downs. He left, got a lot better, and now is a veteran in this league and, probably is going to be an Olympian for the USA team. And he is now been named the 29th captain of the Rangers. It's we're heading towards the start of the season. A few weeks away from that. Preseason begins less than a week away. It kind of, it was a much longer off season than we've been used to the last few years. The Rangers missing the playoffs. So a bit of a welcome sight, just to give my thoughts real quick on the team, and we'll have more content and episodes to discuss before the season begins. But look, I think this Ranger team can certainly make the playoffs. I do believe in the new head coach sort of bump that you see a lot. But ultimately, I still have the same concerns that Mike Sullivan, Mike Sullivan's got a great resume, but in year 2 of Mike Sullivan, we may see a similar thing to what we saw in year 2 of Gerard Gallant, in year 2 of Peter Laviolette. That would not shock me. Now, we don't know what the composition of the team will look like, but yes, I would in a lot of ways expect improvements upon last year. And there's probably enough talent for them to get there. I do have definite concerns as far as the whole look of the defense. I think is a bit of a problem. But at the end of the day, I think that, they should probably find their way as one of the 8 playoff teams in the Eastern Conference. But yeah, they kind of are on the bubble right now as I see it, because again, there really are some holes on the club, but hopefully some young players can step up. They're going to need that. And there's a lot of competition in training camp for some of the younger players. And that will be important. You know what I mean? They're going to need that. So again, JT Miller named 29th captain of the New York Rangers.